You've heard of her beauty, her lovers, her empire. But no one told you what she smelled like. Not the scent of roses, not the perfume of royalty, not even the salt of Nile water, no. What lingered on Cleopatra's skin was something else. Something older than seduction. Older than empire. Something that crept through the corridors of her marble palace like a rotting secret wrapped in silk. You are in her chamber now. The doors are heavy with gold, but the air is heavier still. It clings to your lungs like warm oil. Not a breeze moves. Only the faint rustle of linen against sweating skin. The scent hits you before anything else, thick, fermented, sweet with decay. The sweetness of milk turned sour in the sun. The tang of blood resin rubbed into the thighs. Crushed beetles. Dead flowers. Old meat. And under it all, her. She reclines on a chaise carved from ivory and shaped like a lioness, draped in gauze so thin it barely conceals the film of oil glistening on her body. Her skin, coated in layers of donkey milk, crocodile dung, and resin, glows like wet stone. Her breath is slow, controlled, scented not with mint but with wine-soaked herbs crushed into a black paste between her teeth. She does not move. She does not need to. The air bends around her. You inch closer. Her eyes are half-lidded. Painted. Unblinking. Watching you like a priestess before the altar, except she is the altar. Her lips are tinted with crushed cochineal beetles, her cheeks powdered with red ochre and sweat. The heat in the room rises from braziers filled with myrrh and frankincense, but they do nothing to cut the stench. They only blend with it. They only thicken it. Every object around her has been soaked, drenched in perfume, in oils, in musk so strong it makes your stomach churn. Gloves reek of cassia and civet. Pillows seep with sweat and lotus resin. The sheets are stained yellow at the center. Not from filth, but from routine. A routine of rituals so ancient, so sacred, no one dares change them. Not even the queen. A slave girl kneels at her feet, scraping yesterday's oils from her soles with a blade of copper. The sound, slow, wet, repetitive, echoes through the marble walls like a whisper from the dead. Another girl pours more oil over her shoulders. It runs in rivulets down her spine, pooling in the crevices of her skin. There is no water here. No cleansing. Only covering. Only sealing. Because in this world, scent is not filth. Scent is strategy. And rot is just another kind of royalty. Her wig, black and heavy with goat fat, glistens under the torchlight. You see a fly crawl through its locks, disappear beneath the layers. She doesn't flinch. She doesn't even blink. She has trained her body to endure. To rule. To seduce. To rot, if it must, so long as the empire lives. You try to breathe shallow. You try not to stare at the cracked mask of white lead and vinegar that cakes her face, barely concealing the sores underneath. But she sees you. She always sees. And in that moment, you understand, Cleopatra did not smell like a queen. She smelled like conquest. Like sacrifice. Like 1,000 deaths preserved in perfume. And you? You are not a guest here. You are a witness. To beauty rewritten by blood. To power disguised as ritual. To a body that ruled men not in spite of its decay, but because of it. Because under the silk, under the oil, under the gold, the most beautiful woman in the world, was filthy. In Egypt, cleanliness was not just a virtue, it was a declaration of control. But for the royal body, for her body, hygiene was never about purity. It was about command. You walk through the palace halls, carved from limestone and obsidian, walls gleaming with depictions of gods bathing in sacred pools. The priests chant about purification, the scribes record incense rituals, and the poor scrub themselves at dawn in the Nile's muddy waters, believing the river to be a god's spine. But Cleopatra, she did not bathe to cleanse. She bathed to signal. She crafted her scent like a general sharpens a blade, knowing exactly what message it would deliver, and who it would pierce. Donkey milk. 75 baths of it a month. Not to wash, but to soften, to perfume, to leave behind the faint trace of animal sweetness mixed with her own musk. A queen's odor had to travel, had to enter the nose of an emperor before she did. Julius Caesar did not fall in love with a clean woman. He fell in love with one who smelled like myth. Her daily grooming was a military operation. Dozens of attendants, sworn to silence, trained not in cleaning but in layering, coating her body with oils of cedar, of frankincense, of iris root. Each meant to project a different illusion. Youth. Fertility. Danger. Submission. Dominion. Her skin, lacquered and sealed, became a mirror for her empire, smooth at a glance, cracked beneath. Each oil trapped the previous day's sweat, each perfume sat atop yesterday's decay. But she did not remove. She preserved. She embalmed herself alive, every morning a ritual of becoming both woman and monument. Both seductress and pharaoh. Both flesh and mask. And behind it all, an understanding few dared to say aloud, hygiene was theater. The body was an altar. And for Cleopatra, every pore, every follicle, every secret curve was a stage for power to rehearse itself. Even the filth had a script. Because filth, in a royal body, did not mean neglect. It meant ritual. It meant design. It meant knowing how to turn rot into ritual, sweat into allure, and putrefaction into prophecy. You may flinch now. You may want to look away from the rotting milk, the beetle dye, the oils so thick they curdle in the desert heat. But she never flinched. Not once. She turned her body into a language foreign leaders couldn't read, but would still kneel before. So ask yourself, how much of your identity is cleaned, and how much is curated? And if you've made it this far into her chamber, into her ritual, into the rotting gold beneath her myth, then maybe it's time to stay. Subscribe to Tale of History, where beauty is unwrapped, and power is peeled to the bone. Or tell us below why you'd rather hide behind the lies of soap and marble. Go on, type it. We'll wait. She lies still, the scent of resin and rose water thick in the air, but beneath that polished glow, something darker is at work. You watch as the slave girl enters silently, cradling a small alabaster bowl. Inside it, a paste the color of rust and moss, thick, damp, warm. She stirs it slowly with a gold spatula, releasing a sharp, feral stench that claws its way into your throat. It is not floral. It is not sacred. It is crocodile dung, freshly collected from the riverbanks and mixed with sour milk, honey, and crushed incense. A blend meant not to cleanse, but to conjure. The queen does not flinch. She raises her chin ever so slightly. And the paste is applied. Across her cheeks, along her jawline, over her brow. Each stroke deliberate, almost reverent. It hardens as it dries, tightening her skin until her face resembles a mask carved from clay. A mask of the Nile's most ancient predator. She believes in its power. Not just for the skin, but for the spirit. The crocodile, a creature of death and rebirth, is sacred. To smear its waste upon the face is not merely vanity, it is an act of transmutation. She is not trying to appear younger. She is trying to become eternal. Untouchable. Divine. But the smell. It fights every other aroma in the chamber. The perfume cannot cover it. The incense cannot overpower it. This stench demands to be known. To be remembered. And perhaps, that was the point. Because to be unforgettable was more important than being clean. The Nile was a river of gods and rot. And so was she. Later, when the paste is peeled away in ribbons, her skin emerges flushed, reddened, raw, but glowing. beneath the filth, a new face is born. One that might win a war. One that might seduce a god. This is not pampering. This is alchemy of the flesh. And you're still watching, aren't you? You've followed her into her rituals. You've smelled her myth unravel. You've stood silent as dung was sculpted into regalia. And yet, you haven't subscribed. We research the filthiest corners of history to give you truth, not the polished myths, but the rot beneath the crown. If that's not worth your click, then what is? Or maybe you need to explain. In the comments. Go ahead. Tell us why you won't. Tell Cleopatra, too. She's listening. The crocodile mask has been peeled. Her skin is raw, humming beneath the surface, tight, flushed, almost too perfect. But beauty, in this world, is never finished. It must be built layer by layer, sting by sting. Now another bowl arrives. This one is smaller, darker, sealed with linen. The handmaiden unties it with trembling fingers. Inside, a thick, glistening balm. Deep red, like clotting blood, streaked with fragments of black carapace and golden dust. The scent is sharp, metallic, like wet copper left too long in the sun. The queen dips her fingers in. She knows what it is. She knows what it will do. Crushed beetles. Ant husks. Bits of hornet wings. And most sacred of all, bee venom, harvested from live stingers pulled fresh from the hive. A mixture designed not to soothe, but to irritate, to inflame. Because swelling is beauty. Pain is transformation. She smears the balm over her lips, pressing it in until they throb. Until they redden and swell into something unnatural, something alluring. A shape no birth could give, only suffering could craft. She dabs it under her eyes, across the bridge of her nose, and down the collarbone, anywhere the skin is meant to shine, flush, rise. And soon it does. The reaction is immediate. Redness blooms like roses beneath her skin. Tiny bumps erupt. The venom stings. The acids chew away at the topmost layer. A tingling fire spreads. But she doesn't wince. She breathes in. Because pain means it's working. Outside, the Nile flows as it has for centuries. Silent. Patient. Indifferent. But inside this room, the queen peels herself alive and remakes herself from insects and sting and dust. Her enemies wear armor. She wears agony. This is not comfort. It's chemistry. A science ancient as death and twice as cruel. They called her beautiful, but her beauty was not a gift. It was engineered, burned into her skin like a spell. And sometimes, it festered. Historians whisper of boils, of sores hidden under layers of lead and wax. Of nights when she could not sleep, when her lips cracked and bled from the venom. But every morning, she applied it again. Because softness did not seduce Caesar. Pain did. And the Romans never feared softness. They feared what endured. She was not loved because she was beautiful. She was feared because she dared to become beautiful through suffering. Now, you've watched her smear insect death onto her mouth, onto her throat. You've watched her hold the sting in silence, as if daring the world to do worse. You've learned that even the most delicate faces in history were carved by blood. Still watching. Still silent. We crawl through centuries of rot, venom, and myth to give you truth. Subscribe to Tale of History. Or explain in the comments why you choose silence over sting. Why you'd rather close the door on the queen, than look her in the swollen, burning eyes. The sting has faded, but the redness remains, vivid, deliberate, almost divine. Her lips pulse with bee venom. Her skin glows from dung and acid. But still, something is missing. Something the eye cannot see. Scent. The final weapon. She gestures, and the chamber doors creak open. 2 servants enter, bearing silver vessels steaming in the torchlight. Their faces are veiled, not for modesty, but protection. What they carry is not fragrance. It is fermentation. One vessel contains resin, thick, black, and gleaming like molasses scraped from the underworld. The other contains blood. Real blood. Ox blood, collected warm and stirred with cedarwood oil, myrrh, and cassia until it congeals into something ancient. Something seductive. Something dangerous. The queen closes her eyes. She lifts her arms, and the ritual begins. The blood is poured first, down her shoulders, across her chest, rubbed into her neck until it stains her collarbones like a necklace carved from sacrifice. It smells metallic, primal, undeniable. The perfume of slaughter dressed in silk. The scent of bodies, living, dying, desiring. Then the resin. Pressed into her pulse points, smeared into her scalp beneath the wig, packed behind her ears. The heat of her body melts it slowly. It mingles with the blood. Together, they rise, a dark cloud that curls around the chamber like incense from a pyre. You smell it now. You feel it now. It's not pleasant. It's not clean. But it commands. This is not a perfume meant to charm. It is meant to haunt. To cling to the air long after she leaves. To stain the memory of those who touch her. To bind kings by the nose before they even hear her speak. When Caesar first met her, the Roman records described a presence thick as incense. What they couldn't say, what they wouldn't say, was that Cleopatra reeked of blood. And she wanted them to. Because rot could be masked, but never erased. And rather than run from it, she turned it into a signature. A mark. The Nile carried silt and slaughter. So did she. You, standing here now, would turn away. You'd gag. You'd cough. You'd try to pretend this is not what power smells like. But she knew better. She turned decay into desire. Because what is perfume but a lie? And what is blood but truth? You breathe in, and the room presses closer. The scent curls behind your eyes, scratches the back of your throat. And still she stands there, bathed, embalmed, marked by her own mythology. No queen ever wore blood like this. Not to repel, but to pull. And now you know. The woman they called divine, who seduced emperors, who ruled from her skin down to the soil, never washed away the death on her. She wore it. She wielded it. Because death was always part of her seduction. And yet, you hesitate to click. You watch her layer ox blood over bee stings. You let her stand naked in her truth. And still, you sit, hands clean, breath held, heart distant. But we're not just telling you history, we're breathing it through blood and rot. We give you the scent they tried to scrub out of textbooks. The scent that won wars. Subscribe to Tale of History. Or explain in the comments why Cleopatra's guts are braver than your click. The blood has dried now, thick and sweet on her throat like syrup left in the sun. The resin clings to her hairline. The stench has settled, not faded. It surrounds her like a cloak, a perfume of rot and royalty. But what about the mouth? The empire that kissed Caesar, whispered threats to Rome, seduced Mark Antony beneath hanging lamps and silk canopies, what did that smell like? The answer lies not in roses or mint. It lies in bone. Another vessel is brought forward, smaller than the others. Less ceremonial. But no less sacred. The contents are pale gray, gritty, and sharp to the nose, powdered eggshell, charred animal hooves, and ground antelope bone. Sometimes ash. Sometimes crushed oyster shell, if trade winds had been kind. All of it reduced to dust and mixed with water thickened by tree sap. A primitive paste. There is no brush. Just a length of linen, wrapped around her fingertip like a priest preparing a final rite. She dips it into the paste. It clumps. Cracks. Grit between silk. And then, she begins. The queen presses the cloth to her teeth, rubbing slowly, deliberately, the way a sculptor works stone. The mixture scratches enamel. It does not foam. It does not cleanse. It scours. Blood seeps from the gum line. She does not pause. You flinch at the sound. A low scraping. The grind of calcium on enamel. Like sandpaper on ivory. And when she's done, she spits into a bowl of obsidian. The liquid is pink. The linen is stained. Her breath now, not fresh. Just less foul. Covered, not cured. Her teeth shine, but behind them, the sour ghosts of wine and herbs linger. Sometimes, historians say, she chewed parsley soaked in vinegar. Or fennel steeped in fermented date wine. Not for freshness, but for masking. Masking the decay that came from constant feasting, from honeyed figs and dried meats. Masking what history would rather forget, that even queens rot from the inside out. Imagine it. Caesar, leaning in. The silk of her tunic brushing his arm. The weight of her crown pressing heat between them. Her lips parting, stained with beetle dye and blood-scented resin, and her breath, sweetened with bone dust and vinegar, rising to meet him. And still, he stays. Because this was not about pleasantness. This was about power. Her mouth was not a garden. It was a weapon. And like all weapons, it reeked of what it destroyed. You've heard of her voice, how it could sway senators, hush generals, command ships. But power like that doesn't come through sweetness. It comes through endurance. Through knowing that even the most elegant lie must pass through a decaying mouth. And still she spoke. Still she kissed. Still she ruled. Now ask yourself, after all this, after dung, venom, blood, and bone, what excuse do you have? We show you the decay beneath the crown. The truth behind the myth. We don't sell beauty. We exhume it. Subscribe to Tale of History. Or explain in the comments why you'd rather kiss the lie than taste the truth. The breath has been masked. The skin prepared. The scent, curated. But the body still bears its weight. A queen cannot rule from filth, unless she learns to wear it like armor. And now comes the most sacred ritual of all, the bath. Not water. Never water. Water was for laborers. For washing linen. For cleaning wounds. But for Cleopatra, the body was not meant to be cleansed, it was meant to be preserved. They bring in the milk. Not in jugs, but in clay amphorae, heavy and sweating from the sun. Donkey milk, rich and warm and already beginning to sour. The scent is sour-sweet, a memory of something once pure, now curdled. The tub is alabaster, carved deep and wide, rimmed with gold leaf. It sits in the center of the bathing chamber, lit by firelight, heavy with steam, and already occupied. Because she is not the first to enter it. Before her, priests have sat here, steeping their skin in the same milk. Before them, concubines. Before them, foreign dignitaries seeking favor. This bath is shared. Not by choice. By design. It is ritual. Each bather leaves behind a trace of themselves, sweat, oil, dead skin, breath. They do not scrub it out. They do not change the milk. They mix it. Layer upon layer. Like the perfumes. Like the masks. Like the myths. Cleopatra steps in, and the milk rises to meet her, thick, warm, clinging. She doesn't wince. She closes her eyes. Her skin receives it like a sacrament. This is not for relaxation. This is preservation through saturation. A belief that milk, even when turned, even when stained, holds power to soften the flesh, restore the youth, seal the rot beneath a veil of white. And beneath the surface, something else stirs. Bits of ash from burnt incense. Dregs of blood-red dye. Slivers of bark. Pieces of hair. This is not a bath. It is a brew, and she is both ingredient and drinker. You imagine the heat, the way it seeps into her thighs, her back, her scalp. Her body becomes a vessel in another vessel. Floating in the residue of all who came before her. Floating in their ambitions, their secrets, their diseases. And she knows it. She knows what has touched her before the water ever did. But that is the point. Power does not recoil. Power absorbs. There is no privacy in ritual. Only repetition. Only sacrifice. And even now, centuries later, you have bathed in her filth. You followed her into the milk turned gray, into the rituals rotted by time, into the chamber where beauty was built on the backs of 100 bodies. You've been here for over 10 minutes now. And what have you learned? That beauty was a lie. That power was skin deep. That queens soaked themselves in the sweat of strangers to stay divine. If you've learned something, anything, tap subscribe. And if you haven't, if this milk bath left you cold, if this journey through her rot and ritual left you dry, then write your manifesto of disappointment below. Line by line. Spill it all. The queen is listening. And so are we. The milk dries on her skin in a thin, chalky film, sour and clinging, as though even the bath refused to let go. She rises, not cleansed but lacquered. Embalmed in residue. Preserved in ritual. The attendants step forward again, silent, coordinated, familiar with the next performance. Her head is bare now. Shaven smooth, gleaming with oil. No queen of Egypt wore her own hair. Real hair frayed, fell, died. But wigs could be built. Reinforced. Weaponized. And Cleopatra's crown was not gold. It was a mass of wool, horsehair, and goat pelt, shaped to perfection, stiffened with paste, perfumed and pinned like a monument. But what held it all together, was fat. They bring out the wax, a viscous, yellowish mixture in a shallow bronze bowl. Its ingredients are simple. Rancid goat fat, melted beeswax, and thick resin from sycamore bark. Together, they form a kind of glue. Thick enough to shape, heavy enough to hold, hot enough to melt. You can smell it from here. Not sharp. Not spicy. Just, warm. Greasy. Animal. Like meat that's been left out too long in the sun, just on the edge of turning. The attendants plunge their fingers in. The mixture coats their hands, drips between their knuckles. They begin to sculpt the wig, massaging the fat into the strands, shaping the layers, smoothing the sides like molding clay. They do this every morning. Because by nightfall, the heat of the body and the fire of the sun will soften it again. It will melt. It will attract flies. And still, she wears it. Because it gleams under torchlight. Because it gives her height, silhouette, presence. Because it erases the human underneath. Each curl, each braid, each coil becomes a crown of its own. But not one of these curls breathes. Not one strand moves freely. They are frozen in place, embalmed in grease. And beneath it, her scalp begins to itch. Not from discomfort. From infestation. Goat fat is not a repellent. It's an invitation. Flies buzz near her temples. You see one settle, legs twitching, then vanish beneath the wig's edge. She doesn't move. She's used to it. This is the price. Not of vanity, but of presence. If they remember the smell, they will never forget the face. If they flinch at the flies, they will bow at the throne. This is not hair. It is a mask of power, held together by the same grease used to season lamb for the table. It melts under her crown. It seeps into her skin. It stains her pillows. And yet, she chooses it. Every day. Not because it's pleasant. But because it works. Would you? Would you wear a living headdress of rotten wax and swarming insects, just to be remembered? Would you let your scalp blister and weep under heat and resin, just to make your enemies pause before speaking? You've seen her now, seated beneath a canopy, crowned in goat fat, surrounded by flies. You've seen the mixture melt down the side of her cheek as the desert sun rises. And still, she doesn't wipe it away. Because appearance is not comfort. It's currency. You want beauty? Then suffer for it. You want power? Then let it ferment. We dig into the folds of time where no museum will shine a light. Where power festers. Where history reeks. Subscribe to Tale of History. Or explain in the comments why you'd rather keep your hair clean, than be remembered forever. Beneath the wig, beneath the painted skin, beneath the crown and perfume and ceremonial mask, there was one place left unguarded. The body's final boundary. And even that, was not spared ritual. She gestures, and the others leave. Only two remain, their heads bowed, hands trembling. They carry no gold. No incense. No offering. Only a small, clay vial, sealed with wax, darkened at the mouth from use. They do not speak. They do not need to. This is the most private of rites. The most invasive. And for Cleopatra, the most necessary. The vial is opened. A sharp scent rises, sour, acrid, burning. Vinegar. Not wine vinegar, not fermented sweetness. This is raw. Undiluted. Mixed with oil drawn from snake flesh, what little could be harvested from the bellies of adders and cobras, preserved in clay, warmed by flame. This was her elixir. Her serpent tonic. It was said to cleanse. To tighten. To preserve. To keep the queen's body sacred, sealed from decay, immune to time. But it did not soothe. It burned. Her thighs part in silence. Her breath does not change. The handmaid dips a cloth. It darkens. Then slowly, carefully, presses it between her legs. Not once. Repeatedly. The scent fills the room, vinegar and fat and something deeper. Something that stings the back of your throat. A ritual for purity, performed with poison. She does not flinch. Because pain, again, is proof. And silence is strength. This wasn't medicine. It was mythology. The serpent was sacred. The snake coiled on Pharaoh's brows was not decoration, it was power. Cleopatra took that symbol and forced it into her flesh. Made it a cleanser. A protector. A punishment. But the records, they whisper of damage. Tears. Infections. Ulcers that would not heal. Nights of fever. Days of bleeding. And still, she continued. Because no part of her was allowed to decay. Not even in secret. Because if any part of her rotted, her legend would crack. Her illusion would spoil. She ruled through a body made unbearable, masked by rituals that no man would dare endure. And maybe that was the point. Every day, she walked the palace halls adorned in oils and jewels, but it was vinegar and venom that kept her throne intact. Now, ask yourself, if this is what it took, what have you risked? She risked infection for image. She invited poison into her most sacred flesh just to maintain the idea of divinity. And you? You risk nothing, except not clicking subscribe. If this story isn't worth your attention, then at least give her your honesty. Drop it in the comments. Tell us why a woman who burned herself alive in myth and medicine deserves your silence. The vinegar has dried. The pain, once sharp, now lingers as a phantom heat beneath her robes. And yet, her ritual is not complete. Because even after the oils, the wax, the masks, the blood, and the serpent's sting, there is still the matter of imperfection. You see her gaze now, caught in a polished sheet of bronze. A mirror distorted by time and flame. She runs her hand along the slope of her breast. Slowly. Thoughtfully. There, beneath the skin polished like stone, she feels what cannot be erased by light, softness. The remnants of womanhood. Stretch. Sag. Marks of life. And for a queen who must appear immortal, life is an inconvenience. The final bowl is brought in, unceremoniously. The smell is immediate. Not rot. Not blood. Something smaller. Familiar. Rodent. The handmaidens kneel. One begins grinding the contents, dry, powdery, black, into a paste. Mouse droppings. Mixed with honey. Sometimes lard. Sometimes crushed dates. Ancient physicians prescribed it for everything, bruises, swelling, sagging skin. But for Cleopatra, it was more than medicine. It was insurance. She lays back. Robes open. Chest bare. The paste is applied, spread across the curve of her breasts, the inner thighs, the underside of the arms. Anywhere skin betrays gravity. Anywhere time leaves its fingerprints. It's gritty. It crumbles on contact. But it stains. The color of the Nile's edge in the dry season. The smell of field and fever and desperation. She lets it sit. Lets it dry. Lets the illusion take root. There is no certainty that it works. No record of results. Only belief. And belief, in a woman like her, is stronger than truth. Stronger than medicine. Stronger than disgust. To believe in this mixture, this smear of vermin and sugar, is to believe in control over time itself. You would recoil. You'd gag. You'd turn away from the sight of a queen embalming her thighs with the filth of cellar animals. But she turned it into discipline. Because the myth must be seamless. No blemish. No weakness. No stretch of skin left to chance. Every inch of her body became a battleground where superstition clashed with science. And superstition always won. She didn't ask if it worked. She asked if it was worth it. Now tell me, was it? You've followed her this far. Past the snake oil. Through the milk bath. Into the blood. Into the droppings of rats and mice smeared like sacred ointment across the flesh of a living goddess. And you're still here. Still watching. Still silent. Subscribe to Tale of History, because what you've seen is not beauty. It's war. A war waged on the body for the sake of legend. Or explain in the comments why your disbelief deserves more space than her devotion. The rodent paste has hardened and flaked away, leaving behind skin that gleams with a false tightness. But beneath the surface, beneath the ritual and repetition, something festers. Something ancient, unspoken, and now impossible to ignore. Because there is one truth about Cleopatra no poet would ever write. She did not use water. Not in the way you understand it. Not in the way your body, modern and spoiled, expects. There was no cascade of clean, no soothing stream. No ritual of rinsing the body from crown to heel in cool, pure Nile water. That luxury was not hers. Instead, there were oils. Heavy. Pungent. Thick with age. Pressed from olives, from almonds, from the seeds of desert trees and infused with resins, herbs, and the perfume of rot disguised as sweetness. Every morning, they rubbed her down. Stripped of her robes, she stood bare as stone while slaves anointed her limbs with oil warmed by sunlight. It did not cleanse. It coated. It didn't remove sweat or dust, it trapped them. Held them close. Turned them into a second skin. And when the oils grew too thick, too ripe, too saturated with yesterday's stench, they scraped. Not gently. A dull bronze blade passed over her body, dragging along it a slurry of oil, dead skin, and desert grit. The sound was faint, wet, dragging, rhythmic. A ritual of removal that never reached the core. Only the surface. Always the surface. Because the body could not be allowed to breathe. It had to be sealed. You imagine the feeling. Heat rising from the marble floor, oil slicking every inch of your skin, sand sticking to your sweat. You imagine lying down and feeling your own body slide against itself. Not from moisture, but from residue. From build-up. There are records, foreign, envious, horrified, that describe Cleopatra's scent as overpowering. Not sweet. Not foul. Simply, thick. It entered the nose and stayed behind the eyes. It was a part of her aura, her theater, her arsenal. Because she didn't need to be clean. She needed to be unforgettable. Even when she walked into a room, cloaked in silk, adorned in lapis, crowned in gold, she smelled like the inside of a sealed tomb. And maybe that was the point. To be remembered, not for purity, but for presence. You, in your world of running water and scented soap, cannot imagine it. A body left to steep in its own legacy. A skin that bore the memory of every day it endured. Every heat. Every dust storm. Every ritual. She wore it all. No rinsing. No erasing. Only oil. Only scraping. Only sealing herself again and again like a living scroll, written and rewritten in sweat. And still, you've stayed. You've watched her peel her flesh, sting her lips, bathe in filth, mask her breath, crown herself in fat, burn her womb, and anoint her body in the residue of 1,000 unwashed days. You've felt her skin. You've smelled her myth. You've endured her truth. So now you've earned the right to do one small thing. Subscribe to Tale of History. Or deny her. Deny her labor. Deny her rituals. Deny her madness and majesty. But if you do, confess below. Tell the world why you watched her become eternal, and chose to leave no trace of yourself. The oils have been scraped. The sweat pressed into silence. Her skin now carries the memory of every ritual before it, dung, blood, insects, droppings, venom, and heat. And yet, she is not finished. Because a queen cannot simply live. She must defy death, even while dying slowly inside her own skin. This is the final layer. The one meant not to seduce, but to seal. Not to attract, but to command. Not to preserve beauty, but to preserve legacy. They bring it in, not in bowls or jars, but in narrow vials, tightly stoppered. Myrrh. Resin. Frankincense thickened to sap. Bitumen dark as the mouth of a tomb. The same ingredients used by embalmers for the dead, now warmed and liquefied for the living. The queen does not sit. She stands. Arms lifted. Chin raised. Naked but not exposed. She has done this before. Many times. She does not flinch. She does not speak. The resin is poured in slow streams across her shoulders. It snakes down her breasts, her ribs, her thighs. It hardens as it cools, forming a glaze, a casing, a shell. The same way her ancestors were wrapped and packed and sealed behind stone for eternity, Cleopatra now mummifies herself alive. Not out of madness. Out of intention. Because to rule Egypt was not to live, but to endure. To become myth before death. To fuse flesh with meaning. She didn't want to remain beautiful. She wanted to remain unchanging. As the resin cools, it catches the light. Her body becomes statuesque, gleaming, more sculpture than woman. Her breath is slow beneath the weight. Her skin cannot sweat. Her pores are closed. She is no longer a living creature. She is an idea. And ideas do not decay. The scent of myrrh rises like a ghost from her chest. Thick. Funereal. Not sweet. Not comforting. It's the smell of burial. Ritualized, weaponized, controlled. You see it now, don't you? This was never hygiene. This was never luxury. This was never about softness or seduction. It was about immortality through preparation. Each ritual was a prelude to death. Each layer, a rehearsal. A way to control what could not be stopped. And now, sealed in amber and oil and heat, she becomes something not quite human. She walks the palace halls as her own embalmed relic. A living mummy. A queen ruling not just from a throne, but from a tomb built of flesh. And when Caesar looked at her, when Mark Antony kissed her mouth, they weren't loving a woman. They were worshipping a relic. A body already halfway to the afterlife. You've seen her journey. Every grotesque step. Every grim sacrifice. Every ritual that made her more image than woman. More symbol than self. So now tell me, if Cleopatra could embalm herself in burning resin to survive memory. What have you done? Have you scraped beneath the skin of history? Have you touched the rot that crowns the legend? Or have you simply watched, and remained clean? Subscribe to Tale of History. Or step into the comment crypt and leave your reasons behind. Cleopatra embalmed her body for the future. You can't even leave your name. She stands now, motionless. Encased in resin, painted in blood, perfumed with death. Every part of her prepared, layered, sealed, consecrated like the walls of a sacred tomb. And yet she breathes. Slowly. Shallowly. A relic that still remembers how to move. She is not clean. She was never meant to be. Cleanliness is erasure. A blank slate. The beginning of something new. But she was not interested in beginnings. She was the end, the culmination of 1,000 rituals, 1,000 stings, burns, and stains. A woman who turned every foul act into a signature, every rot into a weapon, every flaw into a prophecy. You called it filth. She called it preparation. You saw rituals of decay. She saw architecture for memory. And now you understand. Her power was not the kind that glowed in candlelight. It was the kind that stayed, long after the flame died out. Her scent lingered in palace corridors for days. Her skin stained everything she touched. Her presence haunted rooms she'd long left behind. Because she was not trying to be loved. She was trying to be unforgettable. And she succeeded. You don't remember her for her victories on the battlefield. You remember her for her presence. For her danger. For her gaze. You remember her because she forced you to. And she did it through dirt. Through dung and insects, mouse droppings and venom, animal fat and blood, sweat and resin. She built a myth from decay. She carved eternity from disgust. Every layer of her body whispered the same unspoken truth: I will not be pure. I will not be soft. I will not be forgotten. She was not clean. She was eternal. And now you've seen it. Not the marble. Not the painting. The real woman. The one hidden beneath centuries of revision, perfume, and myth. The one who burned herself alive in daily rituals to hold the world hostage with her presence. You watched her rot. You watched her rise. Now choose. Subscribe to Tale of History, because we do not sanitize the past. We unearth it. We peel back its bandages and show you the corpse of truth, still warm. Or say nothing. Leave no trace. But understand this, in her filth, she crafted immortality. What will you leave behind? You've seen the rituals. You've smelled the rot. You've watched her body become a battlefield where beauty and power tore each other apart. Now ask yourself, would you trade places? Would you let your skin blister beneath dung and vinegar, just to be remembered? Would you wear the stench of blood and fat like perfume, if it meant you never left the minds of kings? Would you endure the sting of insects, the sting of judgment, the sting of history? To hold a crown no one could take from you? Because that's what it cost. Eternity is not gifted. It's carved, layer by layer, sacrifice by sacrifice, until what's left is no longer a woman, but a weapon. A myth wrapped in flesh. Look again. She sits in the dark now, unmoving. The resin has hardened. The perfumes have soured. The oils have pooled in the creases of her body like tears the skin could no longer weep. Her breath comes thinly, the last ritual complete. But she does not ask for your pity. She asks for your attention. Because power was never about being clean. It was about being unavoidable. So again, look closer. Into the cracked gold mask. Into the hollow of her tomb. Into the silence she left behind that still echoes across centuries. And ask yourself, honestly, would you have worn her crown, if it meant carrying her filth? Would you have kissed Caesar with that breath? Would you have embalmed yourself alive just to be a statue in someone else's memory? Or would you have washed it all away, and disappeared? You followed her into the dark. Into the rituals. Into the rot. And now, all she asks, is for you to be honest. Subscribe to Tale of History. Not to honor her, but to confront her. To face what it really means to be remembered. Or leave your answer in the comments. Would you endure what she did? Or would you choose comfort over memory? The queen made her choice. Now it's your turn.